Louisa thought that leaving her country and starting over in New York would be the perfect way to move forward. A new job, a new city, a fresh start. But what she discovered was far more than that. A broken family, buried secrets, uncertain love, and unexpected friendships. Amid vintage dresses, letters from England, and awkward dinners with New York's high society, Louisa steps into a chapter that will challenge her identity, her desires, and her very idea of love. Today I'm telling you the full story of Still Me, the third and final book in Jojo Moyes' trilogy. It's a story of personal growth, difficult choices, and long-awaited reunions. If me before you and after you left your heart shattered, this is the continuation you've been waiting for. Louisa had left her life in England behind to start a new chapter in New York. She'd accepted a job as a personal assistant to Mrs. Gopnik, a young European woman married to a much older, wealthy man living in the city. The transition hadn't been easy, but Louisa was determined to make it work. Even though she had only just begun a relationship with Sam, a paramedic with whom she shared a deep connection, the distance was hard from day one. Sam had stayed in England, focused on building their future home, while she tried to navigate a whole new life on an entirely different continent. Despite her bond with Sam, Louisa couldn't stop the memories of Will from resurfacing time and time again. Will had been her first love, someone who had left a lasting mark on her life. His death, which she still deeply mourned, continued to influence many of her choices, even now. Luckily, Louisa wasn't completely alone in her new job. Nathan, an old friend who had also known Will, had helped her land the position. His presence gave her a small but steady sense of grounding in the whirlwind of New York life. She also shared the daily rhythm of the Gopnik household with Ilaria, the stern and secretive cook and housekeeper, and Ashok, the friendly and always busy doorman with 3 young kids of his own. The family she worked for had its own pace and hidden tensions. Mr. Gopnik was a middle-aged man with a substantial fortune and a jam-packed schedule. His wife, Agnes, a Polish woman not yet 30, was his second spouse and seemed to be struggling to find her place in this world of privilege. Then there was Tabitha, Mr. Gopnik's teenage daughter from his previous marriage, quiet, sharp-eyed, and impossible to ignore. It didn't take long for Louisa to find herself drawn, almost unintentionally, into the complicated web of the Gopnik family. Though her role was technically that of an assistant, the dynamics of the house kept pulling her into uncomfortable situations and subtle conflicts. Agnes, the young wife, clearly didn't fit in. She tried her best to adapt, but the distance between her and the others was undeniable. Tabitha, her husband's daughter, rejected her outright, and the judgment in her silences revealed a bitterness that was hard to hide. Ilaria, the cook, was even more blunt. She despised Agnes and, by extension, anyone who sympathized with her. Louisa often overheard her speaking about Agnes with cutting, cruel words that left no room for misinterpretation. As part of her job, Louisa had to accompany Agnes to a variety of social events. These were exclusive gatherings hosted by New York's upper crust, steeped in protocol, appearances, and shallow conversations. With her modest background and unpretentious personality, Louisa often felt like a fish out of water, as if every glance was questioning whether she belonged there at all. Agnes, however, had been warm toward her from the start. She had met her husband while working as a massage therapist, back when he was still technically married, but already emotionally distant from his first wife. Their relationship had evolved quickly, and although Agnes now lived in luxury, she seemed to cling to Louisa as someone she could lean on, someone who didn't judge her and with whom she could speak openly. She insisted they be friends, which left Louisa feeling a little conflicted, given their employer-employee relationship. Nathan and the rest of the staff didn't take long to warn her to keep her distance. They reminded her that no matter how much Agnes sought her company, she was still her boss, and blurring the lines between friendship and work could lead to trouble. Still, Louisa continued to accompany Agnes to the events she was invited to, and it was at one of those events where she met Josh, a charismatic, well-groomed young man with whom she had a brief conversation and ended up exchanging phone numbers. As the weeks went by, Sam decided to visit Louisa in New York. Both of them were looking forward to that reunion, imagining simple, much-needed moments after being apart for so long. But almost as soon as he arrived, Sam started feeling unwell. What started as a mild discomfort quickly turned into a rough case of stomach flu that kept him in bed for most of the weekend. Between pharmacy runs, improvised nursing, and sleepless nights, the long-awaited visit turned into a series of frustrating moments neither of them had pictured. For Louisa, things were made even harder by Agnes's endless demands. She didn't seem to care Louisa had a personal life. She'd give her last-minute errands, little things, sure, but they kept Lou from leaving early or enjoying what little time she had with Sam. All she wanted was a few more moments with him before he flew back to England, but even that felt out of reach. Sam, on his end, started to notice the constraints of Louisa's new world, and while he tried to hide it, he couldn't help feeling somewhat out of place. Before he left, he hinted at his discomfort, especially when Josh's name came up, the charming guy Lou had exchanged numbers with at one of the parties. The distance between them wasn't just physical anymore. Little cracks were starting to show in their relationship. As Louisa tried to settle into her new life in New York, she found her thoughts drifting in uncomfortable directions. She trusted Sam, but a new colleague of his started bothering her more than she liked to admit. Her name was Katie, and she worked with him in the ambulance service. At first, it was just curiosity, but before long, Louisa's curiosity turned into a quiet obsession. She found herself checking Katie's Facebook profile more and more often, studying every picture, every post. In several of the photos, Katie was next to Sam, always smiling, always just a little too comfortable. There was nothing obviously romantic about the scene, but Louisa felt something in their expressions, in the way Katie spoke to him online. It seemed obvious to her that this girl was interested in her boyfriend. When Louisa brought it up, Sam denied there was anything going on. He insisted they were just co-workers, and he hadn't noticed anything unusual. Maybe that was true, or maybe he just didn't want to see it. Across the hall from Louisa lived Mrs. Margot, an older woman with a sharp tongue and an even sharper stare. She barely spoke to anyone and shared her apartment with a cranky pug, whose personality matched hers perfectly. The little dog barked nonstop at anyone who dared approach, a perfect reflection of its owner's temper. Margot complained constantly, especially about the noise Agnes made when practicing the piano, which she considered a form of auditory torture. Every complaint was loaded with sarcasm and irritation, as if living in the building was a never-ending battle. Amid all this, Sam showed up in New York again, this time unannounced. And this time, things were different. They got to spend real time together, without interruptions or sickness. For a few days, they finally reconnected. It was a relief for both of them, but that calm didn't last. Just before heading back to England, Sam found a pregnancy test in Louisa's bathroom trash. He didn't say much, but his face changed instantly. You could see doubt and jealousy flash across his face before he even said a word. Without knowing the truth, or asking, he left New York with a suspicion he couldn't shake. But the truth was far more complicated than it looked. The pregnancy test didn't belong to Louisa. It was Agnes's. She'd left it there carelessly, never thinking anyone else would see it. Rumors were already swirling about a possible affair between Agnes and an artist who had painted her portrait at a charity dinner. That same night, she'd been humiliated in front of the entire room by Mr. Gopnik's ex-wife, only adding fuel to the suspicions surrounding her. In the middle of all that tension, Louisa discovered an even deeper secret. Agnes and her husband had an unspoken agreement not to have children, but Agnes already had a daughter in Poland, a little girl officially introduced as her niece. She loved the child dearly, and one of her most urgent wishes was to buy her a piano. Unable to tell her husband the truth, Agnes asked Louisa for help. Her plan was to withdraw small amounts of money each day from a shared account, just enough to gather the total she needed without raising suspicion. Soon after, Louisa returned to England for the holidays. She flew back hoping to surprise Josh, but when she showed up at his place, she found him having dinner with Katie. There was nothing obviously romantic about the scene, but Katie's body language, too affectionate, too familiar, was all Louisa needed to see. She didn't need to see anything else. Sometime later, when Louisa saw Sam again, she realized their story had also come to an end. There were no big fights, no dramatic goodbyes, just a quiet decision to end it. It didn't take long for Mr. Gopnik to start connecting the dots. Something about Agnes's behavior, along with a few suspicious details, led him to an inevitable conclusion. Though nothing was ever said openly, the consequence was clear. Louisa was fired. The decision came directly from him, without much explanation, and Agnes didn't do anything to stop it. Despite the bond they had built, she stayed silent. With nowhere to stay, Louisa accepted an unexpected offer of help from her neighbor, Mrs. Margot. The elderly woman, who until then had been gruff and distant, had just suffered a fall that landed her in the hospital for 2 weeks. Louisa offered to look after her apartment and her cranky little pug, who now followed her everywhere. When Margot came home, weaker than before, she confessed she was in a tough financial spot. She suggested they share the apartment for a while. Louisa would have a roof over her head, and Margot would have company, and someone to help her out. It was a win for both of them. Louisa accepted the offer and started to rebuild her life from the ground up. She found a job at a clothing store and organized her days around work shifts, caring for the dog, and spending time with Margot, who little by little started to open up. That's when Josh reappeared. What had once been a simple attraction grew into a full-on relationship. Louisa couldn't help noticing certain gestures and mannerisms that reminded her of Will, a detail that added a layer of emotion she wasn't sure how to process. But over time, Josh started showing a different side of himself. He became more demanding, more image-conscious, more focused on climbing the professional ladder. One night, before a company dinner, he asked Louisa to change her outfit, making it clear her appearance didn't match the image he wanted to project. And just like that, everything shifted. It was Margot, with her usual bluntness, who reminded Louisa of something important. She should never change herself for a man. That conversation was all it took for Louisa to see what she had already started to sense. Josh wasn't right for her, and this time, she didn't hesitate to walk away. As time passed, Louisa noticed something was off with Margot. Even though she kept up her sharp humor and strong will, there were moments when her energy would noticeably drop. Eventually, Margot told her the truth. She was sick. The diagnosis was cancer. And even though she talked about it with resignation and detachment, Louisa knew it was serious. Motivated by the affection that had grown between them, Louisa decided to track down Margot's grandson. She knew the family history was messy. Margot's son had been raised by his grandparents and had cut ties with her during his teen years. The wounds were still fresh, and he wasn't ready to face the past. But Louisa persisted. She told him about the woman she had come to know, about her illness and her loneliness. Eventually, the grandson agreed to visit. Their reunion was quiet, but meaningful. Later, he came back, this time with his own son, and they invited Margot to move in with them while she went through treatment. She accepted, though she couldn't hide her bittersweet feelings about leaving the little apartment that had become her haven. Before leaving, she gave Louisa something very special, her dress collection. Over her lifetime as a seamstress, Margot had created unique pieces, timeless garments crafted with care and precision. They were valuable, not just for their quality, but for the stories they carried. She gave them to Louisa, not just as a gift, but as a beginning. Touched and grateful, Louisa started dreaming of turning that legacy into her own business. Not long after, Louisa received an unexpected phone call from Mr. Gopnik. He wanted to meet. At their meeting, he got straight to the point. He knew the truth. His daughter Tab, suspicious from the beginning, had hired a private investigator to look into Agnes. The investigation confirmed what Louisa already knew. The existence of the daughter Agnes had been hiding in Poland. Despite everything, Mr. Gopnik was calm, even conciliatory. He offered Louisa the chance to return to work with them, if not as a personal assistant, then in another role within his company. Maybe it was a gesture of gratitude, or maybe respect. But Louisa, now clear on what she wanted, politely declined. Soon after, she started receiving letters from Sam. He mistakenly believed Louisa was about to marry Josh. His words were a mix of warning, nostalgia, and tenderness. In each letter, he revealed a little more of what he truly felt, things he had never been able to say out loud. Little by little, those handwritten pages began to reconnect her with something deeper, something that had never truly gone away. In the end, it was Louisa who made the move. She wrote to Sam, asking him to come live with her in New York, and he said yes. They reunited at the top of 30 Rockefeller Plaza, surrounded by wind, city lights, and the endless New York skyline beneath their feet. And there, high above the city, they found each other again. Let me know in the comments what other topics you'd like to see covered on the channel. And remember, if you enjoy this type of video, the best way to support me is by leaving a like, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell. See you in the next video.